All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be a great podcast today. Right before I get into it, I'm going to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you'd like to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce Doug Holdsworth. Me and him have been sitting here having a little bit of conversation before the podcast even began. I found out he's like lifelong friends with Josh Parrish, that their fathers were best friends. You'll maybe hear a little bit about that. But Doug, for the people that don't know you, I want to start all the way in the beginning, like I always like to do with the guests. I want you to talk about, were you born and raised here in Michigan? What were you like as a young man? We're looking for like defining characteristics that kind of led to you being the man that you are today, and then we'll start to build your story.
Sure. Well, thanks, James. I appreciate you having me on the show. So I am born and raised in Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which for some people is a different land, different world altogether. But that's what I knew. It had a lot to do with who I am today. Small town, growing up hunting, fishing.
What town?
It's called Brimley, Michigan. It's outside of Sault Ste. Marie. So when we talk about being from the UP, the first thing people ask is, do you know so-and-so, or where do they live? Well, they live in Marquette, right? We're talking, a 3 or 4 hour difference between the areas of the West End and the East End. So we're about 40 minutes past the Mackinac Bridge. It's not as far away as people think, but...
How far is that from, like, Escanaba? Because we got Josh Parisian, our UFC guy. He's from Escanaba, Michigan. So when I think of the UP, I always think of Escanaba.
Yeah, Escanaba is closer to, like, 2 hours. It's a little more in the south-central part of the Upper Peninsula. But we're from a little town in the east side on Lake Superior. It's got casinos and a lot of outdoor activities to do. It's a big tourist area, to be honest. Places like Tequamanon Falls. You've got the Sioux Locks. You've got places that people actually come from all over the world to visit these attractions. And we grew up there. So having not lived there since I was, in high school, you realize you kind of take that for granted a bit. There are people that go there as a destination, and we lived there. So I like to think one day maybe I'll live there again. I'm kind of holding out maybe some plans for retirement and so on. My parents are still there. My family's there. I own some property there. So I think I'll always have roots in that area.
So what was it like growing up in a really small town like that? I was born and raised actually in Philadelphia, and then I went to a suburb right outside of Philly. So I knew like the really busy, tons of people. I mean, you walked anywhere you wanted to go, to any friend's house you could walk there. What was it like growing up where you were born and raised, and are sports big there? Just kind of describe that way of life versus like maybe a city life.
Okay, well, to give some perspective, the town of Brimley amasses about 6 square blocks, and then you've got the outlying areas, the farms and so on. So, we had the kids that in the neighborhood, they were your friends automatically, right? It was bike riding. It was, building tree forts and things like this, playing wiffle ball in the summer, playing hockey in the winter, and it was with your group of friends. And that was all you knew. And then the kids that lived outside of town, you only saw them during school because they were not within walking or biking distance. So there were like these different groups based on, what part of that area you were from. But we all centralized at Brimley School because, it's such a spread out area that it would service. To give some perspective, the average class size is about 40 students. My class was abnormally small. We graduated with 26 students. So I would often see people, my college days and say I came from a small town. And they'd say, oh, well, my graduating class was 100. Mine was small too. It's like, no, you don't understand small. 26 people, okay? You dated everybody at least once. Everybody knew everybody's business and so on.
That's what I was going to say. It's basically you all know each other in a town like that. You know of them. If you don't know them personally, you know of them. What size was your graduating class, or did you not graduate high school in Brimley?
It was 26 people.
26 people.
In 1997, yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's incredible. I don't know what my graduating class was, but I mean, hundreds, if not thousands. There was a ton of people.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Were you big into sports as a kid, or what were like the defining things that helped shape you into the man that you are?
Yeah, so of course I was into sports, and in our area, it's way different. You don't try out for the team; you're on the team. Whether it was basketball, football, it didn't matter because, you take a class of 30 or 40 people. And then, the boys in the class, you're talking 15, 16 guys, and, 2/3 of them might go out for there was no tryouts. So you're on the football team, you're on the basketball team. It was hard to get perspective to know if you were any good or not, right? Especially in football. You got an 11-man roster. You might have started, but you still might have sucked, right? It's hard to know. So very different.
You probably had people that were playing offense. They were also playing defense. You were on special teams. Like
Iron Man football, baby. There was no different unit coming in. In fact, our school's highlight was in 1995 that our school went undefeated in football and made state tournaments with 14 men on the varsity roster. It was an abnormal class of outstanding male athletes, and they all peaked their senior year. And we crushed everybody in the conference. We crushed everybody there was to crush. And, of course, we got into, state playoffs. We met some bigger fish. But with 14 guys.
No, that's incredible. That's incredible. Anyone that understands the game of football, knowing that, like, you guys were the team. There was no, like, all right, send in the defense, send in the offense. No, that squad right there, you were like, no matter what, we're going to make this thing work. And you went undefeated. That's outstanding. So when you were a young man, did you know what you wanted to be in this life yet? Did you have any aspirations of like, hey, this is what I want to do? Or were you just kind of like letting life hit you as it comes from being coming from a small town? Did you expect to stay there? Did you see yourself moving out? Just kind of paint the picture of, what Doug thought of the future or what you thought the future was going to be.
James, the most I can remember thinking consistently was that I wanted to be successful. I know that's really broad, but I think I always wanted to be wealthy, as shallow as that sounds for, a kid of whatever age I was when I had those ideas. But I got a lot of influence from TV shows and movies, right? In our area, in our town, people that were considered wealthy or, ultra successful were not all that successful, honestly, comparatively to what we know now, right? Living in a bigger area, having known a lot of successful people through my career, it's all perspective, right? So back then, I just remember thinking, I want to be of a certain level of success that I can provide for my family. I think everybody wants to be better than the generation before, right? And I think that generation wanted us to be better. And that's what my dad always pushed me to do. He wanted me to do well in school. He didn't want me to be, out, playing around after school before doing my homework. And I never understood. Why do I have to go and do homework first? Why do I have to do my homework on Friday? Why can't I do it Sunday afternoon like my friends? Well, a lot of my friends were C&D students, right? And I didn't understand it back then.
Would you say you're thankful now, though, for some of the structure? Obviously, lines can be blurred and sometimes things get pushed too far. But when you look back and you have some grace now from a man that is successful and you realize that, like, characteristics were probably instilled at a young age, are you kind of thankful that you had to deal with those strict regiments versus just, parents that were, whatever, go outside, do your thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I wasn't self-disciplined enough at that time to understand what it was leading to, right? Like, if we didn't make the honor roll, we got in trouble. Now, I can't say that I totally agreed with the approach, but if that's all they knew how to, or the only way that they knew how to instill that in us was, you're going to do this or there are going to be consequences, the end result was the same. And, if that's what it took, that's what it took.
And like you said, if you can know now from a different place, probably having your own children, that the intent was to try to make you into successful young, a successful young man. Do you have siblings?
Yeah, actually, I'm the middle of 3 boys, so that has its own place in all of this.
Got
right?
it. So, your parents were trying to instill characteristics that would be important for your success in the future. What did your dad do for work, or your mother?
So, blue-collar family. When I was youngest, my dad actually worked for a commercial fishing company. He worked on boats when I was very young, and then he got into doing more processing. So he would stand and process fish by hand for sometimes 18, 20 hours straight, because if that's how many fish there were to process, that's what they processed. And he did that until I was in about junior high.
That was kind of the old spirit, man, is like an opportunity to work was an opportunity to work, and you worked until the job was done. Times are changing, and people are a little bit different. Society's changing. We're trying to become more efficient. We're trying to become more intelligent. And there's a lot of good changes that are taking place. But that was kind of the attitude back then, wasn't it? It's like our parents and our parents' were like, no, you get the job done, period, right? Like, you grew up witnessing that from your father.
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite stories. And I only learned this story in the past couple of years, that my dad's first job. Now, my parents met in high school. My dad was a year older, and they married at 18 and 19, I believe, and had kids, started having kids at 19 and 20.
And they're still together to this day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great to hear stories like that.
Yeah, and they're in their mid-60s, right? So they started having their family young. So, my parents are relatively young. But the story of my dad's first job. So he came from 5 siblings. He was the youngest of 5 siblings. He lost his parents when he was, I believe, 15. They both died within the same year. So it was kind of older siblings were kind of raising him as they were starting their own, adult lives and so on. So he didn't have all the best direction coming out of school and, didn't know what he was going to do. And his first job after he got married and they bought their first house, there was a place outside of Brimley where they cut railroad ties. And I don't know what they made. I mean, he told me $12 a week or something stupid, maybe $35 a week. I don't know. But him and a friend drove up to the mill where they cut these railroad ties. And they asked the guy, we want to get on here. He said, I don't have anything for you. So they camped out in front of his place in the car, and they slept in the car. And I don't know if it was 4 days, 5 days past, whatever, and he finally came out and said, all right, I got a spot for you guys. And that was how he got his first job. So does that happen today anywhere in this country? Not that I know of. So there is a work ethic there that you have. First of all, you have to find a job to do, and then you have to do that job. So to finish your original question, my dad started off doing the commercial fish processing. And he realized he needed something better with, pension and better benefits and so on. So he started working at our school as a custodian. And by the time I had graduated high school, he was the head custodian for the entire campus. And he got to retire. I think he's in his 3rd full year of retirement. And in the 20-plus years he was there, he may have taken 5 or 6 days off work, maybe, for sickness or anything else.
And he took great pride in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
My father's the same way. Like, the man has worked himself to the bone, does not complain, could be sick as a dog. Well, let's say before 2020. But could have been sick as a dog, and he'd still go and get the job done, and takes great pride in that. Takes great pride in the sense that I am a hard worker, and I will not disappoint my family. I will not disappoint my whatever it is that he ties it to. But that was a very common theme. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of people embodied that. They wanted to be viewed in that way as dependable, hardworking, resilient. Mm-hmm. They can persevere. Give them obstacles, they'll conquer them. And like you said, there's definitely a shift. Things are, I think, because everything is so convenient now, and everything is so easy now, and we've taken a lot of struggle out. When I just heard you tell that story, you have someone camping out for 4 days for the opportunity to bust their ass working. Right? It's not
for $30 a week.
Exactly. He's not camping out for a guy that's saying, hey, we're going to give out a free car at the end of the week to the, whoever makes it through this competition, or we're going to give a $100,000 salary out. No, he's camping out for the bare minimum.
Yeah.
But it's because he was determined to get that opportunity.
Yeah, you're describing an interesting reality show almost, right? And when he did work like that, he wasn't doing it for the pat on the back or to try to get a promotion. That was the job to do. And he only knew how to work 110%. So he knew what corners he could cut at the school. He used to come home and talk about the corners that had been cut before he got the job. Yeah, I could tell this hadn't been touched in a decade. I could tell this hasn't been touched, twice a year like it's supposed to. And that's what he would do. If he had to go and plow snow at 4 a.m. so the buses could get out, they didn't have to tell him to do that, right? He did it because it had to be done. So... Yeah.
How can you not admire some of those characteristics? So let's shift the story back to you a little bit. You're in high school. You're about to graduate. Do you have a vision for college? Do you know what the next step of your life is going to look like? Are you with a significant other at that point? Do you have kids in the picture yet? What does your life kind of look like in that transition from, what I call the tutorial mode of life? You're getting through school. You're figuring your way out. But now you're going to get released into the real world, and you have to make your own way. What does life look like for you at that time?
So at that time, I had a significant other. I had my high school sweetheart. We were both in the same grade. We graduated together. I knew I wanted to go to college, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And at this point, I can't say role models, but my inspirations were still things I saw on TV and in the movies. This is before the internet had really taken off, so you didn't have all this stuff in your face about this is what you can do to make a living. So I knew doctors, lawyers, people in certain trades and things like that. But I didn't know which direction I wanted to go. My plan was I'll go to college and they'll teach me more about it there. We didn't have great guidance counselors in school. At one point, I was a junior in high school, and they had a company called UTI came through, Universal Technical Institute. And they were going to teach us how to be mechanics on big rigs. And my friend and I in class were like, hey, let's go do that. This will be fun. We'll do it together, right? Because that was the only thing that had ever been presented to us directly as this is a potential career opportunity for you. So I was like, cool, that sounds great. They said I can make 85 grand. Awesome. I'll go do that, right? And obviously never took the next step or anything like that. And then, decided college was going to be it. I'll figure it out there. Applied to a couple of schools, ended up at Central Michigan University. No idea what I wanted to do. I was there. I was very social, I was excited about the party life, but I still wanted to make the grade because I wanted to be there. And my brother, my older brother, who was a year older than me, he had gone to Central the year before and didn't take to it well, didn't quite make the grade, and decided after a year he was going to reset, and he never went back to college. So it wasn't looking good for me, right? And at that point, I was kind of getting the pressure from the parents to do something else. We're not going to send you there to just try to find your way and then end up back here starting over again. So, I was at that point, I was determined that, well, I'm not going to come back after a year. So I'm going to make the grade. I met people, I had fun, I did everything I needed to do, made the grade, and I stayed in it. But even then, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't getting the direction that I thought I would.
So at some point, did you pick a major or pick what you were going to focus on? Or when did it start to come to you? Or is this much later in your story that we're going to get to where you really started to figure out hey, this is something that I would like? Did you find any sparks that pulled you in a certain direction? You know what? This might be it. The way you almost felt about that UTI for a second, it was the first thing that got presented to you and you went, maybe this is an option. Did you get any things that pulled you in the direction?
There was one moment where a girl in one of my classes was going into human resource management, and she knew what she wanted to do. And in the process of working on a group project, she taught me all about what this career was about and why she wanted to do it. I said, well, that sounds great. Same thing, right? I'm like, that sounds great. I'll do that. So next thing you know, I'm signing up for the core courses to be an HR management program. You had to be part of the business school, which was a school within the school at Central Michigan. And you had to take all these core classes. So I was maybe my second or third semester through these core classes, and I had this epiphany where I'm sitting in one of our lecture classes, in a class I'm struggling with, and I'm hearing the people behind me talk about how they'd stayed up all night studying for this chapter quiz, right? And I'm thinking, chapter quiz? Why don't I remember this? And I'm remembering I was out drinking the night before. That was the moment I said, when they come around to select people from the graduating class to go and get these high-paying jobs, they're picking that guy. They're not picking me. And that was the moment that everything changed for me. And I said, well, I'd always talked about being a lawyer. And I had teachers in school when I was in the 6th grade used to joke about how I was going to be a lawyer. Whatever it was about my attitude or my demeanor, that they thought I would be good at that. They were probably right, to be honest. And I decided I was going to be a lawyer. So I met with a guidance counselor. What degree programs can I get into at this stage where I could then go on to law school? Now, mind you, I'm over 2 years into college at this point. I'm taking a lot of classes in the wrong direction. So they led me to a philosophy major with an English minor. And I had taken some philosophy classes, and I was very taken by them. I really appreciated the style of learning. It's not a dogmatic type learning where you read it in the book and then you spit it out on the test the next day. It was all about how you arrived at the answer. You really had to think about things. I was really taken with it. And philosophy is actually one of those areas that does lead into going to law school. So that's what I was going to do. So I graduated Central Michigan with my philosophy degree with these ideas I would go to law school one day. But I wasn't ready to do that right after graduation. I was so done with school at that point. I had the worst case of senioritis I had ever seen. I'm barely making it through my last semester. I'm missing classes. I'm missing papers. I'm like, just get through to graduation. So when graduation was done, I was not going to law school. So tried my hand in the working world, started doing okay with it. That's when I was getting into a door-to-door sales job. Now, this is a whole different direction. This is a whole new...
But it seems like if you were studying philosophy and you thought you might be wanting to be a lawyer, you obviously have certain debate abilities. You have enough self-confidence that you're willing to take on those type of challenges just to even have that pathway in mind. So sales almost seems natural. As I hear your story, I almost think you're personable, you're articulate, if you, like I said, if you wanted to be a lawyer and you're going to be, especially if you're a trial lawyer, right? Like you have to be good at the ability to communicate well and break down information and connect with people. So it makes sense to me. And I bet you probably started doing very well in sales. But so let's talk about that transition.
So it was by happenstance, right? So at that time, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where Central Michigan was, there weren't a lot of jobs for college kids. There's just such a high demand, right? And I had a decent job working at the Soaring Eagle Casino. I left that job and I answered what turned out to be a blind ad for one of these vacuum cleaner companies. Kirby's, baby.
I knew it. Man, those salesmen are relentless. Doug's one of them. Yeah, tell me about that.
So the average turnover in Kirby with this program is like 6 days. And I did it for 2.5 years. So they bring you in a class, and they have this guy pitching you for like 3 days. You still don't know what you're doing. He was such a fast talker, and he would spend all his time talking about what money can buy you and what are your goals in life. And he was so fat. You never even got a chance to ask, what is this job? And on day 3, they tell you, after getting you pumped up, they tell you you're going to be selling vacuums door to door. Half the room gets up and walks out. This is normal practice. This is what always happens. I was set. I'm like, I'm doing this. This is going to be awesome. And in my first 3 days out, I sold like 7 machines.
And it's like super commission based, right? Like you can make a ton of money.
100% commission based. 100%.
Wow. So you're only making money when you're selling vacuums. But if you're a smooth talker and the vacuums are pretty legit. I remember at one time, like 15 years ago, I had a Kirby vacuum salesman come to my house. They did a whole presentation. They poured sand on my floor. They sucked and I was like, damn, this thing is legit. Yeah. I remember the vacuums were legit, but you're basically knocking on doors at random, the way I understand it, and you have to sell yourself and that product to a person that obviously they're going to own a vacuum. They don't think they need this vacuum, and you have to tell them they do.
There are 2 different ways to do it. So because I started this in my still final semester of school, I couldn't go out and do the actual door knocking because that was like a 6-day-a-week, 15-hour-a-day, So I worked on the appointment program. They had a call center in the office that would call people and pitch them on a free carpet shampoo, right? And then you'd go out, show up at the Kirby, and you'd start shampooing the carpet, and you're demoing the machine in the process and trying to make the sale. So I was kind of just skimming by doing that, and that was fine. I was living with roommates. The rent wasn't high. We were getting by in that program. And once I graduated, then I went to the canvassing program. And once we had all moved out of the house and now I was living on my own in Mount Pleasant, now all the bills were mine. And that was when reality really hit. And I'm driving around with a team of people, walking up to a door with a fruit basket saying, hey, we're trying to show off some cleaning products today. And you give them the basket and you go back to the van and get the machine and basically force your way in the door. And I went from doing that to actually running the team, where then it was my job to drive the van around, get the people in the house, and then just come back and close the deal after they demoed. And by the end of it, James, if they had the means to buy the product, meaning that they either had the credit or they had the opportunity to write a check for it, we're talking $1,800, $1,900 for this vacuum cleaner. I was 10 for 10. They could not get me out of the house without a close. That's how it was. And if you didn't have a check, especially if it was Tuesday, if you didn't sell Tuesday, you didn't get a check the next week. That was the pay cutoff. So if we were having a bad week and it was Tuesday and I didn't have much coming, we were out knocking doors late and we were going to push machines. Because when you don't know where the next meal's coming from, the next check is coming from, you do what you have to do. I won't tell you all the stories from my Kirby days because I'm ashamed of some of them myself.
No, honestly, it's a great period of life, and you probably learned so much about business, about people, about pressure sales, about the psychology exchange between human beings. And it was probably, to be honest, priceless lessons for you going into life, because I remember the interaction. It actually got pretty negative between me and this vacuum cleaning guy at the very end. I had to be like, sir, get out of my house right now. Like it got to that point because I was just like, casual. I'm like 22 years old. He's like, oh, come on, let me show you this. I'm like, no, don't worry about it. I don't want to buy it. Oh, it's free. Let me just do this. Da, da, da. And so he shampoos like this little section in the dead center of my living room so that like that is one, color or whatever. And then the rest of the carpet's going to be different. And then this guy like would not take no for an answer. And I was like, listen, I had told you up front, you're going to waste your time. I don't want you to waste your time. Just go to the house next door. You demand it. Like, no, I swear, I'm just new to the business. I'm just learning it. I want to give you this free sample. No big deal. No obligations. And it got to the point where literally I was like, I'm going to throw you on your face out of this house. And like, then he finally left. But I tell you what, his relentlessness, I remember looking back at me and like, I got a little admiration for that
like he
guy.
was pretty good. Yeah.
He was relentless. He was like, no matter what way you tried to say no, he had a rebuttal for it. And I remember, like I said, I had a certain admiration for that type of persistence. Like, you're going to go far, kid. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you have some stories that would probably blow the audience away. But during that period, like I said, do you think you pulled some incredibly valuable life lessons and skills? And it was probably fun. Let's be honest. At being a young kid, fresh out of college, you're with your crew of people. You're going around trying to sell the product. You probably had a really good time.
We did have some fun. Yeah, we had some fun. There was one of the guys actually lived out of town, and he would come in during the week, and he was actually would stay with me, and so we worked together all day. We all hang out at night, and it was like a family really. And I used to kind of joke, and nothing away from my alma mater, but I used to joke that I learned more selling Kirby's for 2 years than I did during my degree program. But that was my own fault. College, you have to go out and get it. If I wasn't getting guidance in college, because I wasn't going out and asking for it, right? They're not going to bring it to your door. So I wasn't going out to the counselor's office saying, give me some career options. I'm 2 years in. What am I going to do? I was taking it all on myself to try to figure it out. And when I came to that point that I said, I'm going to get out in the world, I'm going to make connections, and I'm going to find the right opportunity and jump at it. So jumped at vacuums, did okay with it, realized it wasn't going to be the long term.
What did you, in a really good week, if you're crushing, because you were saying I'm getting 10 out of 10, sometimes I'm team leader, what were you making as a kid fresh out of college? Because some commission jobs can pay extremely well. I mean, it's very lucrative if you're a good salesman.
I mean, it's not huge in today's terms, but back then when I would get a $1,200 or $1,300 check each week, that's big for your
fresh out of college. That's big,
especially if I was coming off of doing just the actual sales myself, where I might make $200-$300 a week. I mean, there was times I was behind on bills and things were getting bad. So yeah, I made it work, right? And I brag to this day that I sold vacuums for over 2 years, just knowing what the attrition rate is there. But I want to tell the funny story about how I got out of that business. My crew and my crew was like 3 other seasoned guys. 2 of them did it longer than I did. And we'd had a good week, and we took Friday off. We went to the movie theater in Saginaw, Michigan, and we watched a movie. Jeff Daniels came out with a movie years ago called Super Sucker. And it's about home vacuum sales. I'm not even going to tell you to watch it because it's a terrible movie, right?
I might watch it just from this dialogue.
So if you've done the job and then watch the movie, you get everything. And they make such a parody of that profession, right? And it's everything from, I'm trying to win this trip. Help me win this trip by buying the machine. They nail everything in the movie. The sales meeting in the morning, the different oddball personalities that make up your typical Kirby office, right? You got an old guy, you got an old lady, you got a college kid, you got all these different personalities, and they nailed everything exactly. And the 4 of us are sitting in the theater, and we're kind of looking at each other like, is this what we do for a living? A month to the day, none of us worked there.
Wow. So you had like a crazy self-reflection at that point of life going, this is us from the outside view. Instead of just being, in your filter, you're just staring like this, and, you were able to take a step back and say, this is who we are in society right now. Although we've learned some amazing life lessons, we've had some great times. Is this who we want to be? Probably not.
Yeah.
Now, I actually want to watch the movie now. I'm not going to lie. Because I remember, like I said, I've only ever had one experience with them. And it was a very bizarre, unlike any other sales experience I've ever had in my entire life. So once you decided I'm getting out of there, you pull a lot of great skills from being able to cold call people or be able to just walk up to a stranger and then talk to them. Like
that was the key. Walk up to a stranger and talk to them was the key.
So then what was that transition? Did you have any direction before you left? Like, did you already have a job lined up, or did you just leave it and say, I'm going to find something?
So in Mount Pleasant, there was a family video, and up on the marquee, they used to always have the sign up for manager training, right? And it'd be up for a few weeks, and they'd take it down. I just always took it as they were trying to hire a manager for that store, and then they kept having to rehire the manager. But it was actually an advertisement for their training program. And one of the days I was, shortly after seeing the movie and kind of making up my mind I wanted something new, I saw the sign up. I was already dressed for work for the day. So I pulled in, and I went to talk to the manager, and the district manager happened to be there that day. So I got the store manager and the district manager. I'm already in shirt and tie, and I'm fresh off of a couple years of doing door-to-door sales. So I walked in sharp, right? Talking to him right off the bat. And I spent time with Family Video, which we'll get into, and looking back at what they looked for in people, I realized how I was able to walk in and get that job kind of on the spot. So they said, come back this afternoon. We're going to talk some more. I went to my friend's house, put my resume together, and I had the job basically by the next day. So I was able to leave Kirby, got into retail management with Family Video, and that was my first, I guess, real job, right?
So not to expedite the story in any way, but I want to make sure we don't run out of time. I want to make sure we get to like your story, what you're doing now. You were telling me a little bit before the podcast, like you're running your own company. You learned from a friend. Your wife is successful. You have some stories with Bitcoin. I want to make sure we get to that point. So I guess the next question I'll ask is like, were there any major jumps between going like, if you went to different management companies or different things, were there any other major jumps in your life where something hit you that you said, hey, I need to change direction? Do you remember why? Like, I'm always fascinated by like switches that flip, like something that takes place and changes the direction.
Yeah, I remember it specifically. So joined the Family Video company, and when I took my first store assignment, I was in the same town as my college friend. We had graduated the same time. He had taken his first job in the logistics field, working with a third-party logistics company.
Is this the friend we were talking about before the podcast?
Right. So we're rooming together, right? I'm running my fan vid store. He's working in logistics. I have no idea what he does, I got promoted to a district manager. I was the youngest district manager in the Family Video company at the time. And a couple years in, he's like, I'm going off and starting my own logistics company with these guys that I know, through work and so on. And having known this guy for years and knowing what his family was about, it didn't matter if he was starting a yogurt stand. He was going to be successful, ultra successful. And I was like, I will hitch my wagon right there. I said, when you get this going, I want to come work for you. So I was with Family Video almost 5 years. He was in his second year of starting his company. He said, hey, we just landed a big contract. If you're serious about this, now would be the time. I had just, even though I was already a district manager, I got kind of promoted again because they would move you around into bigger districts. You'd take on more stores and more active stores. I was in the process of a move. I had just signed a lease to move again for that company. And he said, now's the time. So I had to go back, scribble out the lease, put my notice in to Family Video, and I went to work for his company, and something I'd never done before.
What was it about this guy? Because I could see it in your eyes when you just started to say that. You just knew he was a winner. What was it about him?
He had a kind of drive that, to say he's born with it is an understatement. He's one of the most confident people I'd ever known, from the college days, whether we were out, partying, hanging out with people, trying to pick up girls, whatever it was. He had this confident way about him. He wasn't ultra good looking, average guy, but he had a confidence about him that, I don't know, got anything he ever wanted, it seemed like, and did it the right way. He wasn't cocky about it. He wasn't a jerk. He was just a good guy. One of the ways I used to describe him is we would be in a group of people. There'd be black people in the group. He'd tell a black joke and get away with it. He's that guy.
So he's just the guy that everybody likes. He's just naturally, life seems to reward him all the time. He sets his mind to something and it works out. and he's just able to conquer all the challenges he's a part of. You witnessed this and you said, listen, this is what I want to be a part of. I want to follow in those footsteps, or like learn what makes him who he is. So he starts a company named
It was called R2 Logistics.
R2 Logistics, and it starts blowing up about 2 years in. You leave Family Video, you go to work for him. How long are you guys together? And I'm sure the information you gain during that time is priceless. You get to see the inner workings of a logistics company because you're working directly with the CEO, with the top dog. You get to see what he does and how that corresponds to the company's, productivity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So then let's, I guess unless there's any parts you want to tell of that part of your story, let's talk about you made the ultimate jump, which most people never get to, where you said, now it's time for me to go on my own. Now it's time for me to launch a logistics company. And I'm fascinated by that again, right? Like, was it just confidence in yourself? Was it you had learned so much from the inside of the business that you said, I can do this? Or what was it that made you pull that trigger? But again, you don't have to skip if you have any great stories from working there. But if not, let's just focus on your story.
I got fired.
You got fired.
I got fired. I wish it was as sexy as the way you told it.
No, I bet you that was incredibly motivational.
Yeah, you could say that.
Getting fired is motivational. Getting fired turns that fire on inside of you and goes, oh, yeah? Watch what I can do.
Yeah. My daughter was about to celebrate her first birthday, I think. We just bought a house, So this is where things, talk about things taking a turn. And I was there for 5 years, almost to the day. And, we started off as friends, right? Friends in business. There was 4 of us when I joined the company. So everyone's doing everything together, And at some point, like I assume any scrappy startup company that comes from nothing, there comes a point where you're actually succeeding and you go from being a bunch of friends making money together to an actual business. Now, this is my hindsight, okay, because this was 10 years ago. And the hindsight is 2020, 100%. So we go from being just a bunch of guys making money together to an actual company. He is trying to build a company. And I was stuck in the mindset of, but we're friends. I can do what I want. I'm special, right? And I was very good at it. I was very, very, very good at that. I was the best broker in the company for years. Handled all the big accounts, made tons of money for the company. I was paying the bills while other branches and other teams were coming up and trying to build. So I felt I was owed a lot, right?
And you probably weren't able to view it through the eyes that you have now, where
Oh,
you're
God.
the owner of the company going, even the top producer, like you still have to be the right driving force for the company. 100%. It's great that you can look back with grace for that friend, because there was probably a real turbulent relationship during that initial you getting fired, or the points leading up to that moment. But now, like, as you sit here today, you go, you know what? I can understand it a little bit better.
Well, I understand it way better because I actually went through everything that he went through from the other side. Okay, so our company started, and some of the first people that we hired. Now, while it wasn't my friend, it was actually my partner's friend. They were good friends since high school, I think it was. And he came in, and he was great at what we do. He was fantastic. It reminded me of myself, smartest guy in the room, best broker in the room, just crushed it from day one, having no prior experience. And we kind of became friends too, right? But as time went on, his performance started to wane, and it was all, well, he was friends with my business partner, so he was special, and he needed to be handled with kid gloves, all that. Just, there's so many details that were an exact mirror of what I went through in my first go-around, to in the end where it's like, nobody is special. From the business owner standpoint, you have to continue to produce this fantastic job that you're doing. You have to keep doing it, and you have to get better. The mindset of, I'm going to kick ass for 3 years, 4 years, and then I'm going to put my feet up, and you owe me that because I was here to help you build this thing. That mindset is false. Doesn't work. I had that mindset. I was special, first time around, and I realized the more I ran my mouth, the more I opened my mouth, I disagreed about this, disagreed about that. They were building a fantastic company at R2 Logistics, and I got passed up. I wasn't along for the ride, right? Because I wasn't doing the right things. I brought it on to where they had to show me the door. And at that point, what was I left with? So I didn't have a choice.
I tell you what, that's tremendous personal growth for you to be able to reflect back and view it from that point now. Because so many people, when they get shut down majorly for the first time in life, they turn into resentful, angry, forever. They kind of like doom their own future because that, you know, this one person screwed me and it's all their fault. And if it wasn't for that, I would have been this. When like really, like you said, you set the cruise control. You stopped pushing. You stopped being your real best. All of a sudden, you know, your complaints were more valid instead of like, I just need to produce the best I can because that's my role in this company. And now you as the owner are going like, wow, it is so crazy to be on the other side of it. And friends and business is super tough.
Oh, yeah.
Super tough. I mean, I don't want to go into my story at all, especially because we have a short period of time, but like, this gym, you know, started as a group of, I was teaching my good friends how to do jiu-jitsu. And then it blew up into now we're a massive operation, you know, that's put tons of people in the UFC, professional fighters all over the world, tons of different countries. You know, we're the only gym in Michigan's history to ever put a male and a female in the UFC. We've put people in the Ultimate Fighter, ESPN. But there's a lot of transitions during there. And there's a lot of, wait a second. I'm your buddy. I don't have to listen to the rules here. And that's tough, man. It's really tough, especially if you're a good person and you care about people. Because like it's such a fine line. Like, yes, you're my friend, but then if you're my friend, why wouldn't you, you know, give me your absolute best? These strangers are giving me their best. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you? It's a really interesting dynamic, and I think that's why so many people caution friends and business. And I'm someone that juggles that, and I always want the people that I'm around to be my friends. Like, I care about these people. When they win, I win. But as a business, like you said, you have to look at things in like a certain black or white that's very, very hard on friendships. Mm-hmm. So as you start to see your company blow up, you had mentioned before the podcast that your wife played a critical role in this because you wanted to make this jump. You wanted to start on your own. You wanted to chase your visions, but you were like, I couldn't have done that had I not had this rock solid support for me and my family. Let's talk a little bit about that because a lot of people I think might have the dreams and they might have the fire, but the fears and the doubts and like the, oh my God, what if I fail or I can't provide? Mm-hmm. Never let them make that jump. I think we should talk about that point of your life. You get fired and you didn't just jump into a job. Talk about that transition. Talk about how crucial your partner was. And then I guess just more about as the company's evolved.
Yeah, so the firing took place at the beginning of the summer, and I made a lot of money at what I did, and I had no confidence that I could make that money anywhere else. I was fully convinced that what I was making was still based on the fact that I had this, you know, personal relationship with the people who started the company. So I was always deathly afraid that doing the same job elsewhere, I'm not going to make this money. And when the day came that I was unemployed, while I was provided a severance that was going to last me for several months, I didn't know what came after that, right? So I wasn't looking to stay in this field. I didn't jump right out and say, I'm going to start my business tomorrow. It wasn't like that at all. I had to sit down and get over the shock of being fired. I'd never been fired from a job in my life. And once I was able to get over the shock, then I could start processing, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I did take some interviews with some logistics companies. They didn't pan out. And I answered a blind ad that my now partner had put out to start a brokerage company. His family worked in the trucking industry already, and he wanted to start on the brokerage side of the business. And just quick description, the brokerage is where we still move shipments, but we don't have our own trucks. We contract other trucks to move the freight. And it's a big business, thousands of brokerage companies out there. So we were going to start this brokerage from nothing and try to jump in, carve out a space in this industry. And that was how it started. So it was October of that same year that we actually got off the ground. But our first meetings took place in the summer, and I wasn't sold that that's what I wanted to do. I knew what it took to grow a logistics company from zero to anything. I'd watch my old buddy do it. You know, when I wasn't working with him yet, and it was just him and his partner, he would come home at 10 o'clock at night, order a large pizza, and start drinking vodka because they'd worked all day. I'm like, what do you do? Like, what is this business doing? Sleeping on my couch because he couldn't afford rent because he had to rent his house out because he had no money to pay his own bills. So I wasn't quite sure I wanted to go from zero to whatever. My wife had taken a good job. She was making good money. And if not for that, I couldn't have made the move.
Man, that really is incredible. And one thing I want to dig a little bit deeper into, because you had just said it was the first time in my life I had ever been fired. A lot of the times that people that are natural winners that have done really well their whole life, the first time they get hit with something like that, it is such a devastating experience because they're not familiar with it. They're not like people that have failed over and over and over and over. They just know how to bounce right back. They just know what failure's like. They know how to learn lessons from it. They know how to get back on their feet. You got kind of knocked down for the first time ever because from like hearing your story, you're kind of crushing it all the way up. You know what I mean? This young boy from the UP who's just like a winner in what you do. What were the emotions like during that period, and what got you back onto positivity versus going the path of like resentful, anger, I hate this guy? What were the emotions like, and what do you think actually guided you? Because the man that sits here today, you radiate good energy, you're super successful, you have a great family, you have all these things on track. But during that pivotal moment, what kept you dialed in?
I don't know if I was ever dialed in, James, to be honest. It was a whirlwind of all the emotions that you just described. So in one moment, I was, fuck this, I'm taking on the world. This guy's not keeping me down. And then I'm laying in bed at night going, what the fuck am I going to do? You know, tearing up, whatever, just like, what am I going to do? It did help that they did take care of me with the severance package. So this wasn't like, I need something next week or I'm not going to make the mortgage, you know? So I had the buffer space there. And I fell back on, I did have value in the industry. I had learned to do well in this industry, right? So I think the first thing I thought about was talk to some of my contacts and get some interviews set up. If nothing else, just to get me on the path of I'm going to be employed again. Looking back, I don't think I ever wanted any of those jobs. The obvious answer of what keeps you on track is we just bought a house. We had a baby. Right? I'm not failing. I'm not failing at this. I'm not going to fail. You know, whatever I end up doing, even if it's not what my life's ambition was, I'm not going to fail this family. I mean, I think that's the obvious answer.
And you have a lot of self-confidence in your story. And like you said, you had acquired skills and you had networked. And if you can cold call or walk up to strangers and create conversation in sales, you're probably able to be successful in a really wide variety of life. You know what I mean? And it's all the way back to the beginning of your story. So now, how many years has it been since you've launched this? Because I haven't really asked timeline. Like, when did this all take place? And then how has your company grown over the years? And then if we had to project for like the future, like what are your goals now? Because you're successful, you have money, your company. I heard you're opening another local business if you'd like to talk about that. So you're branching out into a lot of different things. But like, what are your personal goals now? What still keeps you fired up for the future?
I think it is, you know, the things that being a successful entrepreneur have provided. You know, money is great. What you don't realize is time and flexibility. You know, I look back to the days I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and the big successful lawyers, you always hear stories they're working 100-hour weeks, right? You have all the money in the world, you don't have time to spend it, and your family life is terrible. So that's the point where I started getting into the thought of it's not just making a good living, it's what kind of living are you making? What kind of flexibility do you have? Are you free to do what you want? You know, I travel a lot. I travel internationally a couple of times a year. I mean, if I want to do something, I'm able to go do it. My family's able to go do it, with my wife being an entrepreneur as well. So the flexibility has kind of shifted our mindset into wanting to broaden the entrepreneurial aspect of what we do. And, you know, my industry isn't ironclad, is in the logistics industry it's competitive. It's hard, you know. I always wanted to diversify. So I was always looking into getting into storage units or the kind of passive type things that don't take a lot to operate, but there's still income streams, you know, owning different types of commercial real estate and so on. And that's what got me into, I'm opening a car wash is my next project. And that's the first thing I've been able to do to diversify outside of just working in the logistics field. So took some steps. I contacted some people that had some vacant land. They were interested in the partnership, and 2 years later, we're about to go.
And I liked it. I mean, it sounds like you're also creating a safety net so that no matter how rocky or turbulent the logistics field was to get, you have different sources of revenue so that you can maintain the standard of living for your family. You can keep pushing the limits. And like you said, I think real fulfillment comes from how you're able to spend your time. Like, I would not trade, even if someone said, hey, I'll triple what you make in a year, but you're going to work for this company. You're going to work 80-hour weeks. You're going to fly, from this state to this state. I wouldn't want to do it. Being able to control your time, spend the time with the people that you love, you know what I mean? Like, and do the things that give you happiness. That right there, there's riches in that. There's serious wealth in that. You know what I mean? I know a lot of wealthy people that are pretty depressed.
Oh, absolutely.
That are pretty run down. That are like on the edge of a breakdown. You know what I mean? And I know some people that are mid-level, like I wouldn't even really consider them wealthy, but they're incredibly happy because they live their lives in a way that like resonates with who they are or what they desire. So I think you dropped some really good insight right there about like life is more about finding how you want to live this experience. And then obviously you need the resources and the money to be able to get by and have the things that you want, but it's more about how you live than what you do.
Sure, 100%.
So do you have any huge goals that you're still working on? Because you're killing it. You got your business running. You're launching a new business. I'm excited to see the car wash. I asked you, hey, is there going to be a touch-free one? You said yes. So, like, I'm definitely going to stop by and check out the car wash. But moving forward, do you not have any certain bullseyes and you're just kind of like, I'm looking for opportunity, things that help me, expand my outreach, new sources of revenue, continue to live life with my family. You've got one young daughter at home, you said?
2 young daughters, 7 and 10.
2 young daughters. You want to be able to spend as much time with them as humanly possible. You know what I mean? And like, so what are the goals that you still have set, Doug?
So the next goal is I am trying to get that trifecta of the businesses. So I would like to have a third jewel on the crown, I guess. Maybe something in commercial real estate. I don't know. I mean, we still have to get business number 2 up and running. So one thing at a time, and I don't know specifically what I want that to be. I just want it to be something that keeps me more well-rounded, because I'm 43 now, and by the time I'm 50, I think I should have a pretty good idea what like a long-term exit strategy might look like. I'm not going to use the word retirement yet, but just something where I'm not, actively working within the businesses. So the goals within the businesses are all individual. My freight company, there are certain things that we have to do to get it to where I'm satisfied with the trajectory of the company. And we're on our way for that. Car wash, I have my ideas and my goals there. I have no idea what that's going to look like. I'm not even open yet. And then part 3 might be something really simple, commercial real estate, something where you're not, chasing down business and customers and worrying about relationships. And when I come across an entrepreneur, my mind instantly goes to, what do their books look like? What does their home life look like? How do they run this business? Are they at Chamber of Commerce meetings every week? People like realtors who it's the more business cards you hand out, you're going to get more business, And I just think my mind instantly goes to, how much money does this business make and what is your life like? I know a guy that details cars in my town. Fantastic at what he does. Amazing. And he works 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. Does all the work himself. It's not a scalable. I'm not going to say it's not scalable. He hasn't scaled it, right?
Well, he'd have to be able to recreate himself and his passion for it. And if, as soon as you try to just bring people into scale, and now the quality goes down because he is the driving force of the company, then does it scale?
And I know how to do that. That's what we've done with my freight company. I was a fantastic broker. And when I brought guys in and I was still brokering freight, the guys that had the natural skill set learned it from me. Other guys learned it from them. So we have a room full of people that broker freight the way that I brokered freight. So I was able to kind of pass down what I knew to the right kinds of people.
What do you look for in people? Because that's a really important thing, like bringing the right people into your companies to be able to mold to be successful. Like obviously education is great and being a good teacher is great, but there are certain characteristics in people that really can embody like the spirit that the entrepreneur had to give the best to the company the way that you would. What do you look for in people when you're hiring them?
I would look across the table during the interview and think to myself, would I buy a vacuum from this guy?
I love that you just said that. That is awesome. Talk about full circle. Could this guy sell me a vacuum?
Yeah, some of my best guys were not, the college educated, don't have the supply chain degree and things like that. They have sort of an it factor. And I don't know if I can explain it beyond it factor, X factor, et cetera. They have it, and they have it, and you teach it to them the right way. and you pray that their aspirations are in line with yours. And I've got some fantastic people that work with us. I got one of my best guys has worked for me 3 different times. Got fired once, rehired him. Quit once, rehired. And I'm not afraid of that. You know, I'm not afraid to say that. Some people would be like, I'm not giving it. No, it doesn't work that way. No, we didn't look at it like that. It's, this guy is fantastic at this. We had our ups and downs. In his heart, in my heart, we know we both want this. And we finally got back on the right terms and moving forward and crushing it. You know?
That's awesome. Life needs a little bit more of that. I mean, at the end of the day, you're like, hey, if you're willing to be the man you have to be and step up, stop complaining, stop causing issues, and you want to work here. Because if you don't want to work here, then you should quit, right? That creates a bad environment. If there's people part of a company that are just slowly eating away, it's like an infection. It just spreads and it gets worse. They should go. And if you're not performing, you should be fired. But if all of a sudden you're going to step up to the plate and you have the skill set and you're ready to look at it through a different lens and say, you know what, there's an opportunity here and I'm good at it. You know what I mean? And Doug's just going to hold me to standards that, you know what, if I was the CEO, I would hold him to as well, right? Now all of a sudden there's an understanding there. And if there's an understanding, then there's peace. And if he's, made peace with that, then all of a sudden he gives his best. Now you're happy to have him. You're like, Dad, I want you in the company. I don't want to fire you. I want you to do your best. I don't want you to want to quit. If you want to quit, you shouldn't be here.
Right.
You know what I mean? I get that. And that's a really good thing that you stayed that personable and you're not just that ice cold, like, no, you had one shot with me. I cut you. You're gone. You know what I mean? And I kind of would expect that out of you. I feel like you're more of a personable guy, which when you first get business going, that can be difficult because you do have to make some decisions with no emotion or no heart in it. You have to just go, this is the right decision, period. And I actually can thank my fiance a little bit. Around here, I had a really hard time making some desperately needed changes as the business grew. And she's just like, I don't care. I don't care what your relationship is. Like, this is absolutely right for the direction that we're going. You need to do it. So she almost like stepped up and played bad cop for me a little bit. But those things are important. And I feel like as good people, you have to learn how to set healthy boundaries. If you don't know how to say like, no, this is unacceptable. This is not a quality of work that is acceptable here in my company. You're just going to have animosity. You're not going to have great feelings towards the person. Then it's just going to grow to get worse and worse and worse.
Sure.
How many people work for the company now?
In operations, I think we're up to maybe 18. We've been hiring so fast, I have to stop and count. And then we have 5 or 6 that work in administration, accounting, and that kind of thing. They've stayed remote, but in the office, I think we have up to 18 brokers at this point. I wanted to mention one thing from years ago when I talked about how I'd sort of learned my lesson from the other side about working with this young man who was awesome for us, and it just didn't work out in the end. Because we just we couldn't handle the success we were, whatever it was, right? It just fell apart. I used to tell him all the time, you were just like me. I had this conversation. I was in your seat, okay? I did what you are doing. I know how it ends. Stop doing this. You're going to get what you want from this company. You just have to trust me. You have to trust me. But it came off as, dad lecturing the kid, right? Yeah. And the kid's just, yeah, sure, Dad, whatever.
And there's beauty in that. That's like perspective. In life, sometimes you have to go through shit to be able to look back and actually understand. Because maybe if someone had come to you in that early stage when you were the young guy going, trust me, it's going to pay off. It's going to work out. And you're going, yeah, but I deserve blah, 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 and this, that, and that. You had to go through getting fired. You had to grow as a person. You had to see it from the other side. You had to be the top of the pyramid looking down going, oh, wow, that's what that looks like. That's what entitlement looks like, or whatever you would classify it as. And that makes life kind of cool. You know what I mean? Especially if you're willing to give people second chances. That's why I think it's so cool that you told me the story about the guy that you had to fire and then he quit once and now he's back. Because you're not this like, okay, I put my fist down, it's game over. You're just like, this is just the way it has to be. And if you do it that way, let's go. Let's make money together. Let's do a good job. That's awesome to hear. The last thing I want to talk about right before we wrap the podcast up, because I don't want to keep it too long, is in this world, in a society that is changing so rapidly, where people are so disconnected, there's a lot of discourse among people. Kids kind of live through tablets and entertainment devices. It's a strange new world. How do you raise your children to have the same values and characteristics or work ethic, perseverance, things that you and your wife have that make you successful entrepreneurs, because you're able to provide for this awesome life for your kids. You're able to get them anything they need. You can make life pretty easy if you want. How do you still train them to be the successful, confident leaders that are able to pursue what they love in this life?
Well, what we try to do, the results we won't know for a long time. We just try to remind them like where we came from. My wife is just like me as far as the upbringing. Blue collar parents, pinch pennies, worked for everything. Didn't want for anything, but they had to work for what they had. So we both have it. So the kids get it from both sides. I had the conversation with my daughter this morning, who's going to be in junior high next year, and we talked about friends getting phones and tablets. And I said to her, I said, your relationships are going to change. She has a very tight-knit group of 5 friends. And I said, any of your friends have phones yet? Well, yeah, one of them. We talked about it. I said, it's going to change. When you stop talking to your friends, and they are so good and wholesome right now, they remind me of my friends when we were kids, right? They're still innocent. As soon as the phones and the technology come in, it's all going to change. When you guys stop talking to each other and you start texting each other, it's going to happen. So we try to have these little life lessons and these discussions, and we don't know the right way, right? We don't know how it's going to turn out, and every generation of parents deal with the same thing. You're dealing with something new when your kids are at that age, and who knows the best way to handle it? Well, really nobody, because nobody has dealt with it yet at this period in time. We try to remind them about, the value of money and to work hard. We can see them picking it up. My daughter was selling pizza kits door to door a few nights ago because she wanted to, not because we told her to go sell them door to door. And she wouldn't leave without the money.
I was going to say, was she getting the 10 out of 10? Was she channeling that Holdsworth spirit?
I think she closed down most of them. I think one house said just the teenagers were home, so they wouldn't buy. But I think anybody who could buy bought. And the funny thing was, she didn't have to collect the money at that time. And she said to my wife, I think it's just better if I get the money now. So that's right, girl. Get the money. And
you don't want those unpaid invoices. You don't want that. Get the money now.
Problems later. Yeah, money up front. So she seems to come by it naturally. And I tell my wife, I said, she sees us hustling. She hears our conversations. She's picking up on this stuff. So we try to be more cognizant of that. Try to keep it positive. There are a lot of negatives in running your own business. You're complaining about, this client or that vendor. So we try to keep that stuff positive because we know that they're picking up on it.
Well, that's awesome, man. That's awesome, man. And we need more of that type of leadership. And, we just have to set good standards, discipline, focus, teach people skills that are important. And who knows what the world's going to have in store for them. But you know what? If she's that young kid that goes, I'm confident, I can speak to people, I can sell these people a pizza that are strangers to me, those skills can go into such a wide variety of things that hopefully she'll find her success the same way that you and your wife have. So, man, Doug, it was an honor sitting here with you today. It's crazy that you and I kind of know of each other from like a decade ago. You had said, hey,
Yeah.
I was at one of your fights. You actually were at one of my fights live, or you just saw it?
I think I saw you fight once, and I'd been to at least 3 or 4 events where it was a lot of guys from the SFS gym where you were there, you're cornering and so on. And I just always thought it was a neat story, I was never a huge MMA fan, but I liked going to the fights live, right? The young scrappy guys coming up. You get to watch 15, 20 fights in the same night. Had a ton of fun doing that. And because of my friend Josh that we both know, he always kept me up on what you guys are doing. And when he'd talk about a guy or, a girl that was getting into Ultimate Fighter or was going to be on TV, I was like, this is so cool. I don't know these guys, but they're right over here. I've been to their fights. So I was always interested in what you were doing. And then I got into the entrepreneurial side of it. Like I said, I can't meet somebody who's an entrepreneur without thinking, man, what's it like? What are they doing? This is so cool, And I just had an appreciation for it. So I appreciate the chance to talk with you.
100%. And I feel the same way, man. That's like one of my favorite things to sit down and have dialogue with are people that have good stories, especially entrepreneurs, because you face so many challenges. You change your perspective on the world. You change your relationship with money. You change your relationship with responsibility. You change what a standard work week looks like. Like you have so much more depth to a lot of your opinions and, experiences that you've had to go through than someone that just like, I work for this company, I collect a paycheck each week, I have these basic responsibilities. Like our fields are so ever changing and evolving that you have to constantly stay on the game. A gentleman that used to own Brighton Ford was one of the owners. He's deceased now, but when I had first started out business, he said, you have to treat your business like it's a little monster. And every day it needs to be fed. It needs to be taken care of. You need to make sure it's not getting into trouble. You need to make sure that it's not harming the neighbors. It's a little monster, and it grows, and it can grow into this huge monster that can end up defending you and and providing for you and all these things. But you have to be on top of it every single day, like it's a living entity. And I remember when he said that to me, that really made a deep impact because that was such a bizarre analogy. But I was like, wow, like that's the way that this guy looks at it. And he's running Brighton Ford, this massively successful dealership. And I really kind of took that to heart. And now, much later, with the lens that I look back on, it makes perfect sense to me. I see how involved I had to be at every step of the way to guide the vision. You know what I mean? Like the ship needs a captain. You gotta actively avoid things and steer the course. So again, it was an honor to sit with you today. And if you're interested in MMA shows, April 2nd at the Suburban Showplace in Novi, we have 8 people from this school fighting people from all over the nation coming in from other states. We have professionals on the card, amateurs on the card. It's going to be an incredible show. Suburban Showplace, it's 20 minutes from here, April 2nd.
I'll try to make that. We're actually getting back from travel either the 1st or the 2nd, and I'll have to take a look at that. But no, that sounds enticing. It's been years since I've been to one of the shows up close. That'd be great.
Oh, you'd love it. I think there's 16 fights on the card. They got the top 2 heavyweights in the nation on the card. They got a bunch of pro fights. It's going to be wicked. So again, Doug, honor to sit with you today, man, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Thanks, James.